I still remember the sound, not the yelling that was constant background noise in our house. It was the sound of pages tearing, my grandmother's handwritten recipe cards. The one she'd pressed into my 12-year-old hands with tears in her eyes before the cancer took her. He was ripping them apart, one by one, while I stood frozen in the doorway. Real men don't cook, Vance spat, holding up a card covered in Nana's careful cursive. Real men build things, fix things, provide for their families. Mom stood behind him, arms crossed, saying nothing. She never said anything when he went on his tirades, just watched with those tired eyes while he destroyed another piece of my world. I'd been in the kitchen since dawn, practicing the beefs the recipe Nana had taught me. The smell filled the house, rich, warm, like home used to feel. Before Mom married him, when he came downstairs and saw me at the stove, his face went dark. What the hell is this? He grabbed the wooden spoon from my hand, tasted the stew, and his expression got even uglier. It's good, you spending all your time in here instead of learning useful skills. That's when he'd gone for the recipe box, my sanctuary, my connection to the only person who'd ever really understood me. Now those cards were confetti on the linoleum floor, Nana's handwriting, her little notes in the margins about adding a pinch of love, or cook until it smells like Sunday, all destroyed. Please, I whispered, dropping to my knees, trying to gather the pieces. These were hers. They were all I had left. Good, maybe now you'll focus on becoming a man instead of playing house. He kicked the recipe box across the kitchen and it hit the wall with a crack that echoed in my chest. Then he pulled out a padlock he'd been hiding behind his back. Kitchen's off limits. I'm locking it up. You want to eat. You ask permission first. Vance. Maybe that's a little. Mom started. No, the boy's gotten soft. Obsessed with this cooking nonsense. It's time he learned what real work looks like. He snapped the padlock onto the cabinet where we kept the pots and pans. The refrigerator already had a chain around it. I couldn't even get a glass of water without begging. From now on, you spend your time in the garage, learning carpentry, building something useful. Maybe hauling lumber will put some muscle on those chicken arms. I wanted to fight. Wanted to scream that cooking wasn't just playing house, it was art. It was love. It was the only thing that made sense in a world that felt constantly off balance. But I was 13. And he was 6'2" and mean as a snake, so I nodded, picked up the torn pieces of Nana's recipes, watched him walk away, satisfied that he'd crushed another piece of my soul. But as I knelt there on the cold kitchen floor, holding fragments of my grandmother's love, something hardened inside me, a kernel of anger that would grow over the next 3 years, feeding on every humiliation, every locked door, every time he made me feel small. He thought he was making me a man. Instead, he was creating something else entirely. The garage became my prison. Every morning before school, every afternoon after, every weekend I was out there with him, learning to swing a hammer, measure twice and cut once, all while he lectured me about the importance of honest work. Cooking's for women and fancy boys, he'd say. Watching me struggle with a 2x4 that felt impossibly heavy, this is what builds character. What puts food on the table? I wanted to point out that cooking literally put food on the table, but I learned to keep my mouth shut. Every time I argued, the restrictions got worse. First it was just the kitchen. Then it was limiting my portions at dinner. Then it was making me eat last. After everyone else had finished, Mom would shoot me these apologetic looks across the table, but she never intervened, never stood up for me. She'd married him when I was 11, desperate for stability after years of struggling as a single parent. I guess she figured one sacrifice was worth it, even if that sacrifice was her own son. The worst part wasn't the physical labor. It was watching him with my younger brother, Kieran, who'd been born 2 years after the wedding, who had Vance's eyes and Vance's easy smile, who could do no wrong. Look at that natural swing, Vance would say, beaming as 5-year-old. Kieran fumbled with a toy hammer. This one's gonna be a real builder, a real man. Meanwhile, I'd be standing right there, having just spent 4 hours helping him frame a shed. And he'd act like I was invisible. Like I was just another tool he'd used and could put away when he was done. At school, I started paying attention. In chemistry class, not because I cared about molecular structures, but because cooking was chemistry. Every reaction, every temperature change, every timing adjustment, it was all science. I couldn't practice in the kitchen, but I could study the theory. I memorized cookbooks in the library during lunch, wrote down recipes in the margins of my notebooks, watched cooking shows on the old TV in the school's common room, pretending I was just killing time while I actually absorbed every technique, every flavor combination, every chef's movement. Mrs. Henley, the librarian, noticed me reading the same Julia Child book for the third time. "You know," she said quietly, "I have some cookbooks at home, old ones. If you'd like to borrow them." I looked up, startled. Had I been that obvious? "I don't have anywhere to cook," I admitted. "Maybe not now, but someday you will." That night, she gave me a paper bag full of books, real cookbooks, not just the basic ones from the library. Professional techniques, international cuisines, the secrets of sauces, and the science of bread. I hid them under my mattress like contraband. Every night, after Vance's snores echoed through the house, I'd pull out a flashlight and read. I memorized the mother sauces, learned about knife techniques I'd never had the chance to practice, dreamed about dishes I'd never tasted. The garage work continued, but now it felt different. Every blister on my hands, every ache in my shoulders, every time Vance screamed at me for being too slow or too clumsy. It was all fuel for the fire growing inside me. One night, I overheard him talking to Mom in their bedroom. "Boy's gonna be 18 soon. Time to start thinking about his future." "What kind of future?" Mom asked. "Trade school, construction, something practical." "All this dreaming he does, it's not healthy." I pressed my ear harder to the door. "Maybe college." "College." Vance laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "For what?" "So he can waste for years learning useless theories." "No, he needs to learn how to work with his hands, how to be useful." That's when I knew. He wasn't just trying to make me a man, he was trying to make me into him. Another worker bee who'd never question, never dream, never want anything more than what he could build with his hands. But I was already planning my escape. I started working at Gus's Gas and Go when I turned 15. Vance approved because it was real work, pumping gas, changing oil, fixing flat tires. What he didn't know was that Gus had a tiny kitchen in the back where he made sandwiches and coffee for truckers. "You know your way around food?" Gus asked me one day, watching me eye the griddle with obvious longing. Gus was probably 60, with arms like tree trunks and a voice like gravel. He'd bought the gas station after 20 years as a line cook in truck stops across 3 states. I told him about my grandmother, about the recipes I'd memorized, about the books I'd been hiding under my mattress. "Show me," he said, gesturing to the griddle. I'd never cooked on a real commercial surface before. The heat was different, more intense, more responsive. But my hands remembered what my mind had studied. I cracked eggs with confidence I didn't know I had, flipped them without breaking the yolks, seasoned them with the salt and pepper shakers like I'd been doing it for years. "Huh," Gus said, tasting the eggs. "You weren't lying." He started letting me help during the lunch rush. Nothing fancy, just burgers and fries, grilled cheese and coffee, but it was cooking. Real cooking, and every day, I got a little better. The truckers started asking for me specifically. "Where's the kid who makes the good burgers?" They'd say. Word got round the route that Gus's place had stepped up its game. For the first time in years, I felt proud of something I'd done, not because someone told me to be proud, but because I could taste the difference. Feel the satisfaction of a perfectly cooked piece of meat. A burger that made someone's day a little brighter. At home, things were getting worse. Vance had started timing how long I spent in the bathroom, convinced I was wasting time in there. He'd check my school backpack for anything he deemed unnecessary. He'd started making me account for every minute of my day. "Work, school, garage, sleep." He'd say, "That's all you need. Everything else is distraction." But I was getting stronger. Not just physically, though the garage work had given me real muscle, mentally. Every secret cooking lesson with Gus was proof that I was more than what Vance wanted me to be. One evening, I came home to find him in my room, holding one of Mrs. Henley's cookbooks. "What is this?" His voice was deadly quiet. My heart stopped. It's just a book. I specifically told you, no more cooking nonsense, no more distractions." He opened the book to a page where I'd written notes in the margins. Flavor combinations I wanted to try, techniques I wanted to master. "You've been doing this behind my back, lying to me. I haven't been cooking. I've just been reading." Same thing. My first job in the city was at a mid-level bistro. The executive chef was a screamer. The hours were insane. The pay was still terrible, but I was learning French techniques, working with ingredients I'd only read about, part of a team that cared as much about food as I did. 6 months later, I staged at a place with a Michelin star. The chef barely looked at me during the trial, but I kept my head down, worked clean, Followed instructions. At the end of the night, he nodded. You can start Monday. It was like entering a different world. Every plate was a work of art. Every sauce was balanced to perfection. Every moment mattered because one mistake could ruin not just a dish, but a reputation. I learned to work under pressure I'd never imagined. To maintain standards so high they bordered on obsession. To push myself past exhaustion, past frustration, past the point where most people would quit. The chef was demanding but fair. You want to be great, he'd say, then be great, every day, every dish, every moment. There's no in between. I started entering competitions, small ones at first, then bigger ones. I won a few, lost more, but each one taught me something new. About technique, about presentation, about the kind of chef I wanted to become. By the time I was 25, I was a sous chef at a restaurant that had earned 2 Michelin stars. I had my own apartment, my own car, my own life. I sent money to mom sometimes, but we didn't talk. She'd made her choice long ago, and I never, ever thought about going back. Opening my own place was the culmination of everything I'd learned, everything I'd fought for. I was 28, had saved every penny for 3 years, and found a small space in the arts district that nobody else wanted. Ember started as a 20-seat restaurant with a menu that changed daily. Based on what ingredients excited me most, I did everything myself for the first year: cooking, serving, cleaning, managing. It was exhausting and exhilarating and absolutely terrifying. The food critics discovered us in month 6, a revelation, one wrote. Chef Caspian Thorne has created something truly special, food that speaks to the soul. While challenging the palate, the first Michelin star came in year 2. I cried when I got the call, standing alone in my kitchen at 5 in the morning. Prep work scattered around me like evidence of a beautiful crime. The second star came in year 4. By then, I had a staff of 12, a waiting list 6 months long, and job offers from restaurants in New York and Los Angeles that I turned down without hesitation. The third star came last year. Only a handful of restaurants in the country have 3 stars. I stood in that same kitchen where I'd cried 5 years earlier, surrounded by my team, and felt something I'd never experienced before: completion. That morning, I was reviewing applications for a new dishwasher. We'd lost our last one to a better opportunity, which I encouraged, because I remembered being hungry and desperate and grateful for any chance to prove myself. The resume was sparse. Vance Mitchell, 57, seeking entry-level position, previous experience in construction, willing to work nights and weekends, references available upon request. I stared at the name for a long time. Vance Mitchell. It couldn't be, could it? But the address was right. The phone number had the same area code as the town I'd fled from 15 years ago. I called him in for an interview. He looked older, grayer, smaller somehow than the giant who'd loomed over my childhood. He sat across from my desk in clothes that had seen better days, had in his hands, trying to project confidence he obviously didn't feel. Tell me about your experience, I said. He didn't recognize me. 15 years of good food and confident living had changed me that much. Well, I worked construction most of my life, carpentry, mainly, but the work's dried up, and I need something steady. I'm not afraid of hard work. This is a kitchen. It's different from construction. I know, but I'm willing to learn. I need this job. There was something in his voice I'd never heard before. Humility, desperation, the same notes I'd heard in my own voice when I'd begged Rocco for a chance. The work is hard, I said. Long hours, hot, stressful conditions. You'd be starting at the bottom, I understand. You'd be working for someone younger than you, taking orders from people who might not respect your previous experience. He nodded, though I saw him flinch slightly. Why should I hire you? Because I'll show up. I'll work hard. I'll do whatever you need me to do. I looked at him for a long moment. This man who'd told me I'd never amount to anything, who'd destroyed my grandmother's recipes, who'd locked me out of my own kitchen and told me cooking wasn't real work. You start Monday, I said. He exhaled in relief. Thank you so much. You won't regret this. We'll see. I watched him work for a week. He was slow, clumsy, struggled with the pace and the heat, but he showed up on time, stayed late, never complained. The other kitchen staff treated him like they treated all new dishwashers, with polite indifference, while they waited to see if he'd last. On Friday night, after the last customer had left and the kitchen was clean, I made a decision. I prepared a single plate, nothing fancy, just a perfect piece of salmon, roasted vegetables, a sauce that had taken me years to perfect, the kind of dish that had earned me my reputation. that had judges comparing me to the great chefs of our time. I walked it out to the dish pit, where Vance was finishing the last of the pots. "I made this for you," I said, setting the plate down. He looked confused. "I don't understand." "Just try it." He took a bite. His eyes widened, then closed. He chewed slowly, thoughtfully, like he was tasting something he'd never experienced before. This is incredible," he said. "I've never tasted anything like this." "It's funny," I said, leaning against the counter. "I learned to cook from my grandmother. She taught me that food was love, that feeding people was one of the most important things you could do." He took another bite, nodding absently. "I had a stepfather once who disagreed, told me cooking wasn't real work, wasn't manly, destroyed my grandmother's recipes because he thought they were making me soft." Vance's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He looked up at me, really looked at me. And I saw the exact moment recognition hit. Caspian. "Hello, Vance." The fork clattered to the plate. He stood up, stumbled backward, knocked over a bus tub full of clean dishes. I didn't. "How?" 15 years, I said calmly. 15 years of sleeping in cars and behind diners. 15 years of proving that cooking was real work. Worth doing. Worth building a life around. He stared at me, then at the plate, then back at me. You're the chef everyone talks about. I'm the boy you told would never amount to anything, the one you said was too soft to make it in the real world." His face crumpled. "Caspian, I'm not done." My voice was steady, controlled. "You spent years telling me I was worthless, that my dreams were stupid, that I'd never survive without you." I gestured around the kitchen. "This is my restaurant. I have 3 Michelin stars. I'm booked 6 months out. Food critics write about me. Other chefs study my techniques." He sank back into his chair, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. "And you," I continued. "You're here, asking me for a job, washing my dishes, depending on my charity. I know." He whispered. "I know what I did to you. I know I was wrong. Do you really?" He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I was scared. Scared you were better than me. Scared you'd leave and prove that everything I believed about being a man was wrong. I did leave, and I did prove you wrong. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I looked at him for a long moment. This broken man who'd once seemed so powerful, so sure of himself, who'd made a scared kid feel worthless and small. "You can keep the job," I said finally, "but you work for me now. You follow my rules. You do what I say. When I say it, yes, absolutely. And Vance, yes, welcome home, chef." He broke down then, sobbed like a child while I watched, feeling something I hadn't expected, not satisfaction, but a kind of peace. The anger I'd carried for 15 years wasn't gone, might never be completely gone, but it had transformed into something else, something that felt like closure. I turned to leave, then paused. "The plate," I said. "It's a reminder of what I accomplished despite you, of what I became because I refused to let you define me." I walked away, leaving him there with his tears and his regrets and the best meal he'd ever eaten. Outside, the city hummed with possibility. My restaurant was fully booked. My staff was talented and dedicated. My reputation was secure, and for the first time in 15 years, I felt completely free. The boy who'd been told he'd never amount to anything had become a man who'd proven that love, even love as simple as a perfectly cooked meal, was the most powerful force in the world. In the end, that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. He walked to the window and opened it. Then, methodically, he began tearing out pages and throwing them into the yard. The wind caught them, scattered them across the neighborhood like snow. "No." I lunged for the book, but he shoved me back. "You want to be a man? Start by learning to follow simple instructions. No cooking. No books about cooking. No thinking about cooking." He destroyed 3 books that night, threw them out the window page by page while I watched, helpless and furious. "I'm 16, I said, my voice cracking. "I can read whatever I want. Not in my house. Not under my roof." "Then maybe I won't live under your roof." The words were out before I could stop them. Vance went very still. "What did you just say?" "Nothing. I didn't say anything, but it was too late." I'd shown my hand, revealed that I'd been thinking about leaving, about having a life beyond his control. "You think you can make it out there? You think your little sandwich-making job is going to pay for rent, for food, for anything?" He laughed, and it was cruel. "You're soft. You're weak. You'd last maybe a week before you came crawling back, begging me to take you in." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I wasn't scared. I was calculating how much money I'd saved from the gas station, how much more I'd need, where I could go, maybe. I said, but at least I'd be free that night. I started planning for real. The final straw came 3 months later, on my 17th birthday. I'd been working at Gus's for almost 2 years by then. He'd taught me everything he knew about short-order cooking, and I'd absorbed it all like a sponge. The truckers knew me by name now. Some of them would detour 50 miles just to stop at our place, because they knew I'd make them something special. That morning, Gus pulled me aside. "Listen, kid, I got an opportunity for you. My cousin Rocco runs a diner about 200 miles south. Real kitchen, not just a griddle. He needs someone who can cook, someone hungry to learn." Interested, my heart hammered. What kind of job? Prep cook to start. Maybe line cook if you prove yourself. It's not much money, but Rocco's good people. He'd teach you right. I thought about it all day. A real kitchen. A chance to learn from someone who understood food the way I did, but it would mean leaving. Really leaving, not just threatening to. I went home that night planning to sleep on it. Maybe talk to Mom, see if she'd help me figure out a way to make it work. Instead, I found Vance in the garage, drunk and angry about something that had happened at his job. "There's my boy," he slurred. "My disappointment of a son. You know what I heard today?" I didn't answer. "I heard you've been cooking again, behind my back, again," someone had told him. Maybe they'd seen me at the gas station. Maybe they'd just mentioned it in passing, but he knew, making me look like a fool. People in town asking me about my son the cook, like it's something to be proud of. Vance, I just don't. I'm done with your excuses, done with your lies, done with you embarrassing this family. He stood up, swaying slightly. "You want to cook so bad? Fine, let's see how much you really want it." He grabbed a sledgehammer from the wall. "No," I said, realizing what he was about to do. "Please don't," but he was already swinging. The first hit took out the camping stove I'd hidden behind some paint cans. The second destroyed the set of pots and pans I'd been saving money to buy. The third hit the wooden spoon I'd carved myself, splitting it in half. "Stop," I screamed. But he kept going, destroying everything I'd managed to save, everything I'd built in secret. "This is what happens when you lie to me," he panted, holding the sledgehammer like a weapon. "This is what happens when you go behind my back." Mom appeared in the doorway. "Vance, what are you doing?" Teaching him a lesson, teaching him that actions have consequences. I looked at her, begging her with my eyes to intervene, to finally stand up for me. "Maybe this is enough," she said quietly. "Maybe we should all just calm down. Maybe should." The words of someone who'd given up fighting long ago. "No," Vance said, "it's not enough. Not until he learns." He raised the sledgehammer again, aimed at the last thing I had left, a knife I'd bought with my own money, nothing fancy but mine. That's when I snapped. I rushed him. 17 years old, maybe 150 pounds, but I was done. Done being afraid. Done being small. Done letting him destroy everything I cared about. We fought, really fought. I was quicker, but he was bigger and drunker and meaner. He got in a few good hits before I managed to get the sledgehammer away from him. "You want to fight me?" he yelled. "You want to fight your own stepfather? You're not my father," I said, and the words came out steady and calm. "You're just the man who married my mother and made our lives hell." He started toward me again, but I held up the sledgehammer. "I'm leaving," I said, "tonight, and if you try to stop me, we'll finish this conversation." For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then Mom spoke up from the doorway. "Caspian, you don't have anywhere to go. I'll figure it out. You can't just leave. You're 17. You don't have a diploma. You don't have any real skills. I can cook." "That's not a real job," Vance said, but he stayed where he was. "We'll see." I dropped the sledgehammer and walked past them both. Went to my room and threw everything I cared about into a duffel bag, which wasn't much. Some clothes, the cookbook pages I'd managed to save, my knife. When I came back downstairs, they were both in the living room, waiting. "Don't come back," Vance said. "You leave now. You're no son of mine." "I was never a son of yours anyway." I looked at Mom one last time. She was crying, but she didn't say anything, didn't try to stop me, didn't offer to help. "Goodbye, Mom." I walked out into the night, duffel bag over my shoulder. 17 years old and absolutely terrified. But for the first time in years, I could breathe. The first 6 months were brutal. I slept in my car when I had gas money, behind diners when I didn't. I learned which restaurants threw out food that was still good, which truck stops would let You wash up in their bathrooms, which cops would move you along without running your name. Rocco's Diner became my salvation. He took one look at me skinny, desperate, but determined and put me to work. The pay was nothing, barely enough to keep gas in my tank. But he let me sleep in the storage room behind the kitchen. More importantly, he let me learn. You got instincts, he told me after my first week, but instincts ain't enough. You want to be a real cook, you gotta understand the fundamentals. He taught me knife skills until my hands were a roadmap of small cuts. Made me break down cases of chickens until I could separate every part in under 3 minutes. Showed me how to make stocks that would simmer for hours, building layers of flavor I'd never imagined. Cooking ain't just about following recipes, he'd say. Stirring a pot of sauce that smelled like heaven, it's about understanding your ingredients, respecting them, making them the best version of themselves. I soaked up everything, worked 18-hour days because I didn't have anywhere else to go. Because every moment in that kitchen felt like coming home to myself. The other cooks were suspicious at first. I was young, eager, obviously running from something. But hunger is a language everyone understands, and I was hungry for everything: knowledge, skills, the satisfaction of a perfectly executed dish. After 8 months, Rocco moved me to the line. Morning prep, then lunch service, then dinner. My hands got fast, my palate developed, my confidence grew. You're ready for something bigger, he told me one night as we were closing down. Bigger how? City, real restaurants, places that'll push you harder than I ever could. I was 20 by then, had been cooking professionally for 3 years. I'd put on weight, muscle, confidence, but the idea of leaving terrified me. Rocco's felt safe, familiar. I'm not ready. Nobody's ever ready. That's why they call it a leap of faith. He helped me write my first real resume, taught me how to talk to chefs, how to ask for a stage, how to prove myself in a new kitchen. Most importantly, he taught me that cooking wasn't just about feeding people, it was about creating moments, memories, connections. Food is love, he'd say, but it's also ambition, pride, expression. Don't ever let anyone tell you it's not important enough. I thought about Vance when he said that, wondered if he was still in that garage, still believing that the only work worth doing was work you could hold in your hands.